Hi everyone, Pete here. Today I want to do a little study on the patterns between Bible prophecy and world events. Thanks for watching. You're watching Yahweh's Messenger. In this episode, we're going down the trail of connecting Bible prophecy with world events. This will help us see where we are in the biblical prophecy timeline. Where are we actually at in Yahweh's timeline? Once again, I thought I'd try out ChatGPT since it reaches out through all internet search avenues. It's amazing what it can find that you wouldn't have thought to turn to. So here's my question for ChatGPT. Hi, can you show me patterns in world events and patterns with Bible prophecy? Here's its response. Hi, Peter, that's a fascinating and deep topic. Many people throughout history have tried to find patterns between world events and Bible prophecy. There are certainly recurring themes and interpretive frameworks that some scholars and theologians have pointed out. Below is a high-level overview of some key patterns often cited, along with examples of world events people have linked to them. One, rise and fall of empires. Biblical pattern. Daniel chapters 2 and 7. Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue representing successive kingdoms. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Daniel sees beasts symbolizing empires. World events. The fall of Babylon in 539 BC to Persia. Rise of Rome, then its fragmentation into the Western and Eastern Roman empires. Many see a revived Roman Empire in the European Union today. So let's talk about the return of Israel. The Bible actually has some pretty remarkable prophecies about this. In Ezekiel chapter 37, the Valley of Dry Bones is said to represent Israel's restoration. And both Isaiah chapter 11 verse 11 and Amos chapter 9 verses 14 and 15 talk about a second regathering of Israel. Now looking at world events, there's the founding of the modern state of Israel back in 1948, and then the recapture of Jerusalem during the Six-Day War in 1967. A lot of Bible scholars, well, they see these moments as literal fulfillments of those ancient prophecies. Moving on, there's the topic of global conflict and tribulation. The Bible, in Matthew chapter 24 and Revelation chapters 6 through 18, speaks of wars, famines, plagues, and persecution that'll happen before the return of Messiah. Yeshua himself calls these birth pains in Matthew 24 verse 8. If you look at world history, events like World War I and World War II are seen as part of these escalating global conflicts. And honestly, pandemics like C-19, natural disasters, and all this social unrest, some folks really view these as signs of the times. Next up, we've got the increase in knowledge and travel. There's a prophecy in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4 that says, "Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." When you think about world events, there's just been this huge growth in technology and travel. Airplanes, the internet, artificial intelligence, you name it. Some people interpret all this as pointing to the so-called time of the end. Now let's talk a bit about moral and spiritual decline. The Bible in 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 through 5 says, "In the last days perilous times will come, marked by selfishness, disobedience, and immorality." You know, Romans chapter 1 and Matthew 24 also talk about widespread lawlessness. When we look at the world today, we see cultural shifts like the sexual revolution, a decline in religious observance, and an increase in violence or division. Some folks see these trends as fulfilling prophecy about the end times. Moving on, let's look at global governance and the anti-Messiah. Revelation chapter 13 describes a one-world government and the mark of the beast. And in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, there's mention of a man of lawlessness. In our world, we've seen the formation of the United Nations, plus advancements in digital currency and surveillance technologies. Some people speculate that things like artificial intelligence or centralized systems could be paving the way for such a figure. All right, so let's just sum up the patterns and events we've talked about. First, there's the rise and fall of empires, which is found in Daniel chapters 2 and 7, and we can link that to the fall of ancient empires in the European Union. Then, the return of Israel, mentioned in Ezekiel 37 and Isaiah 11, lines up with events in 1948 and 1967. Global conflict and tribulation, as described in Matthew 24 and Revelation, are reflected in world wars and pandemics. The increase of knowledge found in Daniel 12, verse 4, connects to the explosion of the internet, artificial intelligence, and technology. Moral decline, talked about in 2 Timothy 3 and Matthew 24, shows up in secularism and shifts in identity. And finally, global governance from Revelation 13 is linked to the United Nations, digital identification, and central bank digital currencies. So these patterns and events, well, they sure seem to echo what was written in the scriptures. Then ChatGPT asked, so, would you like me to go deeper into any one of these categories, like, the return of Israel, or maybe the anti-Messiah and global systems? Or maybe you'd rather see this in a visual timeline or chart? And hey, are you interested in historical interpretations like from the early church or the reformers? Or would you prefer more modern prophetic viewpoints like dispensationalism, preterism, or futurism? Just let me know, because that would really help me tailor this better for you. My response, all of the above, thanks. Here are some biblical references. In Daniel chapter 2, there's Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue, which represents 4 kingdoms, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Then, in Daniel chapter 7, there's the vision of 4 beasts, symbolizing that same succession of empires. So, looking back through history, we see some pretty remarkable fulfillments. First, there was the fall of Babylon to Persia in 539 BC. Then, you've got the rise and fall of the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great. After that, the Roman Empire really took center stage, eventually splitting into East and West, and then fragmenting even further. And, some folks even speculate that a kind of revived Roman Empire can be seen today in the modern European Union. Now, when it comes to interpreting all this, futurists tend to see these as literal kingdoms, with a final stage still to come. On the other hand, historicists interpret them as a sequence of empires, unfolding one after another throughout history. When we turn to the Bible, there are some pretty striking references about Israel's return. In Ezekiel chapter 37, there's this vision of dry bones coming back to life, which symbolizes Israel's rebirth. And then, in Isaiah chapter 11 verse 11 and Amos chapter 9 verses 14 and 15, Yahweh promises that Israel will return to their land. So looking back at historical fulfillment, in 1948, we saw the establishment of the modern state of Israel. Then, in 1967, there was the recapture of Jerusalem during the Six-Day War. Now, when it comes to interpreting these events, dispensationalists see this as a major fulfillment of end-time prophecy. On the other hand, preterists might view this more metaphorically, or as a reference to the return from the Babylonian exile. Turning to biblical references, in Matthew chapter 24, it talks about wars and rumors of wars. And then, in Revelation chapter 6 through 18, there are judgments described, including war, famine, and plague. So, when we look back, World War I and World War II are often seen as major escalations of global conflict. Then, in more recent times, we've got modern terrorism, all those regional wars, and even natural disasters making headlines. And of course, things like C-19 and other pandemics have really shaken the world. Now here's where it gets interesting. Futurists, for instance, see all these events as precursors to the Great Tribulation. On the other hand, preterists believe these passages are actually referring to the fall of Jerusalem way back in 70 AD. There's a biblical reference that comes up a lot here. In Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, it says, "Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." Pretty thought-provoking, isn't it? So when we look at modern developments, it's pretty wild to see just how much things have changed. We've got the digital revolution, the internet, and artificial intelligence all reshaping the way we live and work. And global travel by air and even space has become almost routine for some folks. Now, looking at this through an interpretive lens, these changes are often seen by futurists as evidence that we might be nearing the end times. But hey, some scholars actually think this was all fulfilled back in the post-Enlightenment era, so there's a bit of debate there. When it comes to moral and spiritual decline, the Bible has a few things to say. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5, it says, "In the last days perilous times will come." And then in Romans chapter 1 and Matthew 24, verse 12, we hear about lawlessness and moral decay taking hold. It's definitely something folks have noticed and talked about for a long time. So some of the modern indicators folks point to include these cultural shifts away from traditional values, an increase in violence, more broken families, and a rise in secularism. Now, evangelicals often cite this kind of decline as a key sign of the last days, but honestly, others see these trends as just cyclical, something that kind of repeats itself throughout history. When it comes to biblical references, Revelation chapter 13 talks about a beast from the sea with global authority. And in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, there's mention of the man of lawlessness. So, when we look at modern parallels, we can see the growth of the United Nations and other global political bodies. There are also moves toward digital IDs and centralized banking systems. And well, the rise of AI and surveillance technology is becoming more and more apparent. Looking through different interpretive lenses, futurists anticipate a literal world leader. Historicists, on the other hand, often identify the anti-Messiah with historical figures like Roman emperors, or even institutions like the papacy. And then, preterists interpret these things as having been fulfilled back in the 1st century. Let's break it down a bit. When we look at patterns in Bible prophecy, we see the rise of empires, like in Daniel chapters 2 and 7, with key events being Babylon, Rome, and even the European Union, interpreted by both futurists and historicists. There's the return of Israel, mentioned in Ezekiel 37 and Isaiah 11, with events like 1948 and 1967, viewed through dispensational and preterist perspectives. Global conflict, found in Matthew 24 and Revelation, shows up in things like World War I, World War II, and even pandemics, and these are interpreted by both futurists and preterists. Knowledge increase, as described in Daniel 12 verse 4, is seen in the internet, AI, and global travel, again with futurists and historicists weighing in. Moral decline, noted in 2 Timothy chapter 3 and Matthew 24, is reflected in secularism and cultural shifts, and that's often discussed by evangelicals and those who see history as cyclical. And finally, global governance, referenced in Revelation 13 and 2 Thessalonians 2, includes things like the United Nations, digital currency, and surveillance, interpreted by futurists, historicists, and preterists alike. Let me know if you'd like a visual timeline, a deep dive into a specific view like dispensationalism, or maybe a connection to current 2024 to 2025 events. I said, yes, please. And here's the image that it gave me. I then asked, can you show me where the current events tie together in Bible prophecy? Its response. Here's a breakdown of how current events are weaving together into the framework of Bible prophecy, especially through a dispensational futurist lens. Recent confrontations, such as Iran's April 2024 drone and missile attack on Israel, are seen as early indicators of the prophetic coalition of the North launching an attack against Israel. In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, Persia, which is modern Iran, and allies like Russia, are prophesied to come against Israel. While this isn't the complete fulfillment just yet, the tension is viewed as a significant foreshadowing. The international spotlight and diplomatic battles over Jerusalem, called a stone of burden in Zechariah 12 verse 3, are really intensifying and echoing prophetic expectation. Increased focus on Jerusalem is tied by many folks to end-time scenarios in Matthew 24 and Revelation. Digital currencies, growing surveillance technologies, and tracking infrastructures, well, they're really triggering concerns about control over buying and selling without a globally mandated mark. As Tom Hughes notes, a system that cannot be escaped. Technology is creating a system where no one can buy or sell without being tracked, and that sure does echo Revelation chapter 13, verse 17. Rapid developments in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and globalized communication are being seen as a clear fulfillment of that knowledge shall increase prophecy. Experts like Brett Meader observe these trends converging with war surveillance and climate shifts. Rising moral relativism, apostasy, deceptive ideologies, and proxy wars, well, they really do fulfill warnings about false messiahs, moral decay, and increasing conflict before Messiah's return. The ongoing spread of secularism and extreme ideologies are viewed as imminent signs of perilous times. So, European and global political cooperation, especially among these so-called 10 kings, is often interpreted as setting the stage for a revived Roman Empire and, well, the coming of the beast system. Hey, check out this timely update that outlines some key global developments that are moving us toward prophetic climaxes. So first, Israel's growing conflicts, especially with Iran and on the northern front, well, they really mirror Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. Then, Jerusalem is becoming a flashpoint, just like Zechariah's prophecy described. Technology and surveillance, they're rapidly moving toward a system that could honestly enforce the mark of the beast, as mentioned in Revelation chapter 13. And moral collapse, war, and deception, these all echo Yeshua birth pains in Matthew 24 and Paul's perilous times in 2 Timothy chapter 3. Finally, political moves toward global unity, they sure fit the revival of the Roman Empire and beast narrative from Daniel and Revelation. All these converging trends, geopolitical pressures in Israel, rapid tech growth, moral decay, and global governance shifts, are seen by a lot of futurist interpreters as fitting the Bible prophecy's blueprint for end times events like the tribulation and the rise of the anti-Messiah. Gap 1. S. I then asked ChatGPT this. Can you show me about the rise of the Assyrian anti-Messiah and where it fits in with Bible prophecy and current world events? ChatGPT's response, absolutely, Peter. The idea of an Assyrian anti-Messiah is a specific prophetic view held by some futurist Bible scholars and teachers. It's not the most common view in mainstream eschatology, but it's gaining attention, especially as people watch developments in the Middle East. The Assyrian anti-Messiah. Who is he? This view proposes that the anti-Messiah will arise not from Europe, as in traditional dispensationalism, but from the region of ancient Assyria, which includes parts of modern-day northern Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and possibly Iran. Key scriptures referencing the Assyrian. Several Old Testament passages refer to the Assyrian in a context that some interpret as prophetic and messianic, pointing to the end times. 1. Micah 5, 5-6. Context. This passage is post-messianic. Micah 5, 2 refers to the birth of Messiah in Bethlehem. Some believe this links the Assyrian with a future anti-Messiah figure who invades Israel. 2. Isaiah 10, 5-34. Originally about the king of Assyria, but some believe it has a dual fulfillment, including a latter-day anti-Messiah. 3. Isaiah 14, 25. Interestingly, this chapter also contains the famous reference to Lucifer's fall, Isaiah 14, 2-15, which many associate with the spiritual fall of Satan, who empowers the anti-Messiah, cf. Revelation 13, where this fits in Bible prophecy, the prophetic theme and traditional view on the Assyrian anti-Messiah. The origin of the anti-Messiah revived Roman Empire, Europe, modern Assyria, Syria, Iraq, Turkey. Key verses Daniel 9:26, Revelation 13, Micah 5, 5-6, and Isaiah 10, 14, invasion of Israel, Gog, Magog, or anti-Messiah from the west. The Assyrian invades from the north, Syria, Iraq area, empowered by Satan, Revelation 13. The same. The current world events that may connect. 1. Syria's ongoing chaos. Syria is still unstable post-civil war. The northern region, ancient Assyria, remains a geopolitical hotspot with Iranian proxies, ISIS remnants, and Turkish operations. 2. Turkey's regional ambitions. President Erdogan has called for a revival of Ottoman glory and sees Turkey as the protector of Sunni Islam. Turkey controls parts of northern Syria and Iraq, core Assyrian lands. 3. Iran's influence in Iraq and Syria. Iran supports militias throughout the Middle East, including Syria and Iraq. Some speculate this is pre-positioning for future conflicts involving Israel, Ezekiel 38-39, or the Assyrian anti-Messiah rise. Why this view matters. If the anti-Messiah is not European but Middle Eastern, then Western prophecy models, like EU-focused interpretations, may need rethinking. A Middle Eastern anti-Messiah might align better with Daniel's emphasis on kings from the north and south, Daniel 11. Islamic eschatology, some think the Muslim Mahdi could be a false messiah. Notable teachers who support this view, name belief. Joel Richardson, popular author of The Islamic Anti-Messiah, argues that the anti-Messiah comes from the Middle East, possibly from Turkey or Syria. Walid Shubat, former Muslim turned Christian who teaches the anti-Messiah will arise from an Islamic country, likely Assyria. Perry Stone has mentioned the Assyrian title in connection with the end-time man of sin. Summary, aspect Assyrian anti-Messiah view. Key identity. A man from the Assyrian region, Syria, Iraq, Turkey. Biblical titles, the Assyrian, king of the north. Little horn, global role becomes the anti-Messiah. Invades Israel powered by Satan. Revelation 13. Fulfilling Isaiah and Micah prophecies, current relevance, Middle East instability, and growing power vacuum in ancient Assyria. Then ChatGPT asked, would you like a map of ancient Assyria overlaid with modern borders? Or a comparison between the European and Assyrian Antichrist theories in visual form? I said, yes, please. And here's the image that it gave me. Let's continue to study and learn and grow together as we continue to watch these remarkable times unfold. Well, we've heard it. Now, what do we do with this knowledge and information? I pray that you can get a blessing out of this message. Yahweh bless you all.